Hey, it's Dave Bauer.
And this is Brian Mertens, and you're listening to Rewilding Conversations.
Yeah, I'm feeling excited to hop into this topic. We're talking today about actually looking at the internal side as a mentor, and where our goal is to connect people with nature, but in order to do that, you yourself also have to be connected with nature. And so it's looking at we wanted to actually look at strategies that we can use as mentors to help ourselves go deeper and expand our own awareness into the natural world, and through that create the opportunity where it's actually going to be easier for you to then connect your students and your children with nature, where if you're connected, then the people around you are going to get connected. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, after having some years under our belts, spending time in the wild and spending time with people in the wild, I'm thinking that there's great wisdom to pause for just a bit and do that intrapersonal analysis, that intrapersonal examination of what works. And I think we've got some interesting questions that we want to pose to each other, pose to ourselves, because in essence, when any time a leader pauses to go inside and analyze, so what really truly makes me tick, what truly excites me, what are those moments? Where have those moments arisen? Who have I been with when those moments have happened? I think great wisdom emerges, and frequently people that lead initiatives in the world too frequently, well, let's just say they don't frequently enough take the time to share with others that they're in a relationship with, and hey, take me inside your life and tell me a little bit about what works for you. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I got a few questions I could throw to both of us, or did you feel you wanted to start the questioning component out today, Brian? What's your pleasure?
You go right ahead, and then
Okay.
I've got some stuff here too.
Good.
We can just
Good.
go back and
Good.
forth.
Yeah, I think so too. I think one will lead to the other. So where have I found opportunities to connect to nature? I'll reflect on that intrapersonal domain, and if there's something you want to pick up on or add to, or that would be great. So I guess the question is how have those opportunities emerged? And in looking back on my life historically, I think I grew up at a time, being born in the early 50s, where I had organic, frequent time in nature. Now, I wasn't born in a wildlife refuge, and I wasn't born on top of Mount Everest, where I was in super rugged wilderness. I was born in a relatively moderate suburban of Buffalo, New York. But I had a tremendous amount of contact time. I had very, very frequent unstructured contact time. And we've been talking to others in the world at work. I'm doing a creative nature play. And many of us are saying, yeah, wasn't it wonderful? Weren't we lucky? And then I talked to some younger adults who I could tell maybe had a fair amount of that early contact time with nature. And they'll say, yeah, I grew up on a farm, or yeah, we would go on really fascinating and frequent trips in nature, some of them more like vacation trips, and some of them more kind of organic, everyday things. So I guess my short version to my question is I was fortunate because as a young person, I had highly frequent, unstructured opportunities to go outside and be with my buddies, be with myself, and just discover what's there. when I climbed the tree and the lot that had no home built on it, 3 doors down. What did I discover? When I dug in the soil in that same lot that was there, fortunately, when I was a young child, didn't have a house built on it, and we found remnants of bullets from the Civil War and stuff in the dirt.
Oh wow!
There was just a fascination that I couldn't put a price on, but today I would value it significantly more than I probably did as a young child. So why don't I just pull up for just a moment and bring it back to you, because you grew up in a bit of a different generation, and there's a lot of people your age, not that you fall into this group, but that just aren't spending very much time in nature, didn't grow up spending very much time in nature, whose parents kind of structured their days pretty heavily, and who may even refrain from taking their child out in nature. So let's bring it back to you and give you a chance to talk about, where did you find those early opportunities to connect with nature?
Well, I guess I was fairly fortunate in that I had a relatively outdoorsy family. It wasn't like the sort of situation where we weren't very intentional about how we connected with nature in the way that I think about it these days. At that time, I didn't really realize the benefits of actually getting outside. It was just we had cherry trees in the yard, and there was a maple tree in the front that we would always love to climb up to the very top and see how far we could see. And we would go hiking and camping a lot. I spent my my kindergarten years, the pre-kindergarten and kindergarten, at a Waldorf school. And so they integrated a lot of nature trips into their curriculum. We would go to this farm and wander the landscape, and they would do different celebrations at the harvest time and the solstice and that kind of stuff. And so I think through that, those would be sort of my earliest memories of connecting with nature. And to me, I think for me, I just loved looking for gnome elevators. And it's a gnome elevator is one of those shelf mushrooms that grows on the side of a tree. And they were really common in Ontario, in the area where I lived. And I used to just love going around and finding them, and I would make up all these stories about how there were gnomes living in the forest, and those elevators are what they used to get up and down the trees. And so it was really, as I got into my teen years, I think I definitely sort of got away from nature a little bit and started getting more absorbed into technology and having a little bit of a busier life. I did a lot with music around that time, and it was really when I was about 17 years old, I started going back to it because I really took more of an interest in my own philosophical discovery, and I started to realize that as a person and who I was developing into during my teen years, I didn't really feel tuned in with what was happening in the world. Like I felt like my senses had become a little bit dull, and I was missing the adventure of life. And so it was around that time when I really got back into nature connection in a more intentional way, and really started going outside and wandering a landscape with the intention to put my focus on nature and learning about the trees and the plants, and using my ears in a conscious way to track the bird language. And it just it totally it was like taking my connection in nature to that much deeper level, because I was actually was actually focused on it and actively cultivating that as a level of connection. So that's some of my background there.
So let's talk about the personal side further, because I think I'm really excited about sharing the transparency of our younger and middle lives with our followers and listeners. So let's talk about the who's that we have in our lives. So I'm going to address the question, who assisted me? Who did I have in my life that was of significance, that fostered this ability for me to someday grow into something that I call a nature mentor? And I guess I'd have to say, I guess a person that played a pretty significant role, this is going to sound a little odd, was my high school biology teacher, because it was at that point that I began to need to decide, sophomore in high school, what might I do with this life I think I'm supposed to be leading? You begin to have some of those questions as a young person. And I began to ask myself, well, what do I love? What do I love learning? What do I love discovering? And it was related to topics and items that were coming up in what I was being exposed to at that time in terms of a biology, high school biology class. And then from there emerged many, many other subset steps and little baby steps. I think backpacking was a significant assister, so that I had a friend, and I didn't want to backpack alone, so the who was my friend, Dan, who would backpack with me. And wow, you talk about a rich time when you're carrying 30-some pounds on your back, for several hours a day, and you're beginning to realize, okay, where am I going to run to my next little stream where I can filter water, because I can't carry much water because I'm backpacking. You become acutely aware of your relationship with nature. Simple things like water acquisition on a daily basis we needed to find it. We needed to pay attention. And if I hadn't had my buddy Dan as a younger adult, I might not have had that rich and satisfying experience of gaining some real comfort in terms of the wildness component. I'd have to say with some comfort that backpacking is one of those ways you can experience a quality of wildness. And you don't have to be surrounded by saber-toothed tigers. It's just a real natural, rich, multi-day experience in nature. So bringing it back to you, my friend Brian, is there a who or several who's that come up for you that was rather significant that assisted you in your mentoring?
I would say that just the as I mentioned before, the experiences of going hiking and camping with my family, even though it wasn't like a really intentional sort of connection experience, it definitely gave me the exposure and the opportunity to just be out there and engaging with the natural world. And really when I in my late teens, when I started taking a much more interest in some of the deeper aspects of nature awareness, like tracking and bird language, and it was definitely challenging to find people who I could even relate to about the kinds of things that I was interested in, because there aren't really that many people who are still practicing tracking and all the different skills of outdoor awareness that I was really passionate about. And so I ended up actually just going out west and going to a school out there. And but I mean, that was always one of the things that I kind of wanted to kind of work on as part of my career. Like I feel like I would have really benefited at that time from just having someone to talk to on a regular basis and share. Like, I'm going outside, I'm trying to figure out this bird language stuff, and I know that there are birds and hawks and cats moving around the neighborhood and owls and stuff, and I'm trying to listen for the alarms and just track the patterns of bird language, and I'm having a hard time just figuring it out. It's not really coming together for me, and to be able to talk to someone who has a real experience with bird language and who can sort of point me in the right direction, ask me some good questions, I think that would have been just so helpful for me. And so that's kind of one of the things that I'm more focusing on now with the programs that I do now, is actually giving people that opportunity where we can actually connect on the phone, and I can point them in the right direction and all that kind of stuff. And so I'd say a lot of my own the things that the big leaps forward that I've made, a lot of it came from books. Just being really passionate about the topic and really making a commitment to just read everything that I could get my hands on and explore lots of different ideas and then try things out. It's sort of mentoring myself in a way, asking myself lots of good questions, and slowly but surely having it all come together. So, yeah.
I think the who is a really fascinating area, and we can leave ourselves, you and I have talked about this in the past, Brian, we can leave ourselves in today's society a bit isolated and kind of feeling lonely when we rely so heavily on communication that's electronic, and we just don't seem to take the time that we used to in previous generations to just spend time with people, and then developing that whole who domain of human existence. And I think in less developed parts of the world, there's still a high quotient of one-to-one or several-to-several episodes of communication and relationship building. So I think one of the things that I would really encourage our listeners to pay attention to, acute attention, is find one or more, and if you're lucky to find one, that's great, but find one or more authentic who's that you have in your life that are going to coach you, be your guide, be your support, be your advocate, even be your buddy. Sometimes the language that I use is ally, so a nature ally, someone that has some connectivity to some interest that you have. And take the time to be with that person. Create those invitations. If they don't offer them, you offer them, but build that relationship with those special one or two who's that you need to find. And you can use the internet to help find them, maybe. And then if that's helpful, great, go there. So I know in my case, when I wrote my children's book, What's Under That Rock, Papa, I leaned on some big names, real big names that some of our listeners have heard. Richard Loup and Scott Sampson. If those are not names that anyone's heard of, they would want to check those names out. They're the big global kind of Moses and prophets of the nature world. And then there's the everyday people, like you and I found each other 3 months ago, and how satisfying this has been for us. And I just continue to feel blessed with having this connectivity with you in this now relatively informal, very natural way where we're doing these podcasts about every 2 weeks. What a blessing. I didn't have this, some months ago. So I think who's are very important.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm curious about for you right now, Dave, and your ongoing connection in your life. Do you have any daily or weekly routines of getting outside, and like what's sort of your way of connecting with nature in recent times?
It'll be fascinating to hear the contrast between mine and yours, because they're going to be significant. So I'll start with mine. Thank you for the invitation. So for mine, sitting on my porch, walking into my yard, observing the world of nature through a very transparent lens that I have into a micro section of its ecology. You know, my what I hear, what I see, what I smell through when I step out my back door. I don't live in the wilderness. I live in a setting that provides a lot of green space, and I got a little fountain that attracts birds. I got bird feeders. I've got Oriole feeders. I've got a creek nearby. As a young kid, I grew up near, not here, but miles and miles away. The creek existed, and as a young person, I fished in it. And it just so happens that that same creek is about a 90-second walk from my home today. And my grandchildren's 3 and Kai and I have shared many episodes of play there. And then the other one that came to mind when I heard you asking the question, the one that came to mind pretty frequently, is my biking, my pedal biking. I find that I extend my view into the world just a little further. When I get on my bike, I do it. I try to aim for doing it every other day when possible. I'm pretty good at keeping that quotient up. And I just find a real deep satisfaction between the physical activity, the sunlight, the view of others in their worlds. So when you walk or bike around other humans, you don't know what you're going to observe, but you observe daily episodes of other people interacting with nature. And that's always interesting and pleasing to me sometimes to see that. Lots of dog walking, lots of weeding and trimming of yards. And every now and then a young child will wave to me and I'll smile and we'll catch each other's attention. So that kind of connectivity of being, he's in his neighborhood and I'm riding my bike through his neighborhood, and the kid's probably 4 or 5 years old, but there's that instantaneous, simple connection. So those are the 2 most frequent episodes that come to mind in relation to your question.
Nice.
Yeah. Let me hear what yours are.
Yeah, I'll definitely share what mine are too. And just before I do, I just want to point out that for everyone listening, that it really can be that simple. It's if you're looking for ways to connect with nature, you don't necessarily have to go out into like a big wilderness area and immerse yourself for like 9 months and grow a really long beard and in order to connect with nature. It can really be as simple as just going into the garden and opening your senses. And that's really the thing is that it's less about what you're doing and where you're doing it, and more about how are you being as you're out there. What are you bringing in terms of your own personal focus and awareness? That you could go on a bike ride and be totally up in your head and oblivious, not really paying attention to what's happening around you. And that's going to be a very different experience than going on that same bike ride, but actually having that intention to look and listen and connect. And, you're actually taking in the world that's around you. And so that's really sort of my approach these days, is to always, whenever I go outside, to bring my awareness with me and bring myself with me, where I'm not going out to to worry about stuff or be really caught up in my own thinking. I actually part of why one of the benefits of actually going outside to connect in that environment is that because it does offer so much more of that sensory stimulation. It stimulates the brain in a deeper way, helps you get beyond those sort of mental blocks that normally wrap us up when we're stuck in our work or staring at a computer screen. And so I always find, I a few times every day will just go outside and hang out in my garden, and I'll look at my plants and what's growing and what have the slugs been eating, and just paying attention on an ever deeper level where I get to know. It's not a very large area that I explore, but I know that area so well that if there was this thing that it's from a Tom Brown Jr. book that if when somebody moves something in your house, you know about it. But when somebody moves something in the forest, I know about it. And it just points to that whole thing where when you know a place in nature so deeply that, the smallest little stick gets moved and it just stands out to you, that really is a very deep level of attention and focus and, understanding that you have about a place. And so that's what I would say is sort of my core way that I do. And I spoke on a previous podcast episode about the barred owls that are living here, and so there's always these little mysteries happening in my yard, and I will find house cats moving around. There's always like alarms for the house cats, and the robins, the crows, the blue jays alarming at the crows. We get hawks flying overhead, and there's just, this small little space right in my backyard, and it's this entire world of adventure. And, I think that when you can get to that point where, the places that you go, when you step outside that door, there's all this adventure and excitement and things for you to find. They're all just sort of flooding your senses, and there's all these different opportunities, things that are catching your curiosity. When you now take that child into that situation and you have all this curiosity built up, and that child is going to pick up on it, and they're going to start noticing things too. And so you're just going to be in a really great position to actually share that infectious curiosity and desire to pay attention to the world with whoever you're with. I'll go tracking with people, and especially like when I get to the point with people where they're practicing an intentional connection with nature, they're interested in tracking and plants and bird language and all that kind of stuff, and I'm also interested in those things. When we go out together, our sensory radar is so open that we just notice so much stuff, and it just, we both find that just a real deepening of our understanding through that time. And so, that's kind of like a long way to answer your question, but I think that there's a lot in that that people can use, on their journey to, connecting your family, connecting your students, all of that kind of stuff. That it starts inside with you and your own awareness, and just doing what feels really simple, doing what feels really easy. In your own backyard or, right in the schoolyard, just whatever it is that stands out to you. If you're really excited about tracking, go tracking. If you're really excited about bird language, do some bird language. And, the people that you're sharing that with, they'll come along for the ride because your passion and your curiosity will be so infectious.
You started with something that really captures one of the core principles and essence of being in nature, whether you take on the lens of mentor or not. And I think children natively remind us of what this aspect is. And I think you said something to the effect of be present. How are you being in nature? So, and there's kind of a checklist of things not to be. So don't bring a smart device with you, or at least put it down when you are trying to be in nature. Set it in airplane mode if you can. Be present to the sensual world, and I think you've done a really nice job reminding us in podcasts what those senses are. We now know through some research that we found that there's a remarkably large number. Cohen is the gentleman's last name, and he has identified 50 some sensual neural nets that are in the human brain. So we typically bundle those into the five senses, and this gentleman decided there has to be more than five. So there's remarkably more, and they're subtle, but they're real, and he's got names for them, none of which I can quote right here. I'd have to go back and do my research, but there is a remarkably rich sensual net of stimuli that we can pick up, but we won't pick them up if we've got a lot of mental, emotional baggage. We need to kind of be able to be present to where we're at. So, and I find these little bit of times that we find in nature to be remarkably satisfying and soothing. I get psychologically way calmer when I go in and then come out of even something as short as a 20-minute or so experience in a natural setting. Some people you'll find walking around the block. Well, one of the reasons walking around the block is pretty satisfying is that you can place yourself in a physical setting and not be connected to quite so many distractions when you walk around the block. Preferably try to walk around the block without a headset. Try to walk around the block and be open to being where you're at. So I want to thank you, Brian, for reminding us of that need to pay attention to your sense of being. I often say to kids when I'm presenting to them, and I'm hoping that there's a couple adults nearby, because I like to point this out to the adults nearby. And I'll be doing this in my summer programming at nature centers and libraries and bookstores this summer. But I'll say, kids, you still have your magic eyes. Kids, you still have your magic ears. And a lot of people, as they grow up, they kind of lose those magic eyes and they lose those magic ears, but you still got them. So I really want you to ask your mom or dad or somebody who loves you to take you outside where your magic ears and magic eyes can really be awake, and maybe point out some things to the adult that's with you, because they may not see that magic that you see. They may not see that magic that you can hear. So just that mysterious sense of there is magic all around us, and we can, in today's modern society, regrettably, we kind of cut ourselves off from the magic of nature, from the healing properties of nature. And children, I find, to be a really satisfying group. That isn't to say being up with a kid can't be a mess. It can be a total mess sometimes, for sure. But more often than not, that child brings a sense of being in nature with them. That if you can just get still for a bit and just be with the kid for a little while, whether it's a relative or whatever, a child you love, or just watch a kid in the backyard or at a park. Watch children at a park. If you don't have your own children, walk up to the nearby park and just hang out and watch the kid. You probably will be smiling. You'll be hearing things that you may have said as a little kid. They're in a world in a way that we too often have left behind. So, So thank you, Brian, for reminding us of that need to pay attention to how are you being in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the core thing, and I wanted to talk about an experiment that was done a few years back, and I think I might have actually mentioned this on a previous podcast, but there was this experiment that was done where they were taking mentors, and they were going to be working with kids in a nature connection setting. And they had two different groups. The first group were being basically starting in with the kids right away, having no past experience with being in nature. Maybe they had spent a little bit of time camping and stuff, but they didn't really have any training in tracking and how to use your senses and being aware of the world. And then there was a second group that prior to this had done a year-long immersion program where basically they were doing things like going outside and sitting down and observing the birds and the plants, and really awakening those senses and getting really tuned in with the world, just being really present. And then so they took these two groups and they were working with kids. I think it was kind of in like almost like a summer camp sort of situation. But my knowledge of the details of this, they're a little bit shaky. But the essence of this is that two groups doing the exact same thing with kids, and the ones that had the background in nature immersion were so much more successful. Their programs went so much more smoothly. The kids came away with a much deeper appreciation and love for the natural world. And it just goes to show how much your own level of awareness, your own way of engaging with the land will actually transfer and get passed on in subtle ways to the people who are around you. And I just wanted to say that.
Okay, well, do we have another question on your side? Is there something else that you wanted to make sure we touched on during our conversation today, Brian?
There was one other thing that I had kind of written down, and I wasn't sure if we would get to it or not, but since you mentioned it, I guess the other thing that I was thinking about is sort of like the difference between a one-off nature experience versus an ongoing routine of connection, where there's kind of I think it's fairly common for people to have experiences where they sort of, it's sort of like camping. Like, you have the summer vacation where you go camping for like a week in a park, and you do lots of hiking and just spending time around big trees and that kind of stuff. And then you come back to your life, and everything sort of goes back to normal, and you still, when you walk outside, you don't really notice the robin singing on the post, and you're not really paying attention to how the flowers are coming and going through the season and turning into seeds, and the leaves coming out, and all these changes that are happening around us. We don't really tune in with them. And so I just wanted to make that contrast that, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about just how simple it can be to, even just going into your backyard and being tuned in for 20 minutes with what's happening. That can be the whole foundation of a nature connection practice. And in a lot of ways, doing it every day, doing a little bit every day is actually more powerful than doing like a whole week, but only, in August. And then the whole rest of your time you're just tuned out. And so I just wanted to draw that to light, that it takes a little bit of the pressure off, because you don't have to worry about taking time off of work. You don't have to worry about totally rearranging your life and carving out weeks at a time to do this stuff. It can literally be 20 minutes in the evening, and that would be a really great way for people to move forward. That if you get one thing from this podcast episode of like, what can I actually do in order to make sure that I'm covering my bases, and that I am, as I'm helping people around me connect with nature, I'm also making sure that my connections are getting built. It would be just to go outside every day for 10, 20 minutes and sit down somewhere and just pay attention. Just be present, use your eyes, use your ears consciously, and do a little sit spot. And if that's all that you do, that's like the starting point. and everything will build on top of that. So, yeah, I think
so. There's real science built into what you're saying. I mean, the world of neuroplasticity and the research around neuroplasticity is evidence that the more frequently a neural pathway is fired, a neurochemical impulse is fired in a human brain, the more satisfying and easily the satisfaction will come as a result of that. So what you're saying is frequency is crucial. Yes, the frequency is crucial because every time the impulse is sitting, the 10 to 20 minutes occurs, you make the neural pathway a little richer, more efficient, and technically you're laying down a very thin, fatty layer called myelin along the neural pathway. So this is why frequency is crucial, and the week-long vacation is satisfying, and it's good. It's a good thing. And you will find many more benefits come for you as a nature mentor. Many more benefits come for you as in terms of how do I take care of me in terms of my nature experience. As you say, Brian, frequency. Do it frequently. Do it. The lighter the lift, the better, so that you don't have to take a big long drive to get it done. And I think the research backs us up in terms of saying you will find the neural pathway becomes much more rich and satisfying. And those that you're with, to the degree you can coach them, in terms of making this regular and repeated daily, ideally, there's great wisdom in the world of science that would verify the value and the ease of that. And without the repetition, it may not yield the level of satisfaction and knowledge that you might gain by doing it more frequently in a lighter way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that's great. I mean, I think we covered a lot of really good stuff there. And is there? I guess I'll throw that same question back to you. Is there anything else that you particularly wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I guess a quality in my life that I'm working on right now is the quality of gratitude. So I'm trying to create for myself very intentionally episodes of conscious gratitude. And I'm going to apply that to nature and nature mentoring. So gratitude in general is a replenishing emotional, psychological state. When you can target gratitude first for your own blessings and your own gifts that are unique to you, that uplifts you and makes you feel better about yourself, because too frequently we have a high critical self, and when you're in that domain of expressing and paying some attention to gratitude, we feel better, our immune systems kick in. There's a ton of research that shows when you're in a moment of gratitude remembrance, really good things are happening for you emotionally and physically, and in terms of the relationships you're in. So I'm going to now just target, I am grateful. I'm trying to find episodes of expressing my gratitude for the nature that I have in my life, for the moments that I have that are light, and they're not always joyous. For example, I lifted the cage off of the forget-me-not bush, and regrettably, when I lifted the cage off and put my deer spray down, forgot to spray up that bush, that evening the doe came up and ate half the bush away. So what do I learn? So you're grateful for deer? No, I'm not grateful. I'm frustrated. I'm aggravated with that doe, because I was really protecting that bush significantly, and I'm reminded of my lack of full impact and influence. So I'm grateful for the humility that deer reminds me of, that I don't have total dominion over what goes on in my backyard. But there are other things that if I can make that shift to gratitude and appreciate, I don't appreciate that the bushes have gone, but I do appreciate that I am humbled by the fact that there's nature about and around me, and I have wisdom to gain from it. So even when things happen to me that are seemingly frustrating and not welcome, I can begin to take on an attitude of gratitude. And that, I think, is an important quality for any mentor. It's an important quality for any human being, to go back to that practice of being conscious about being grateful. That's where I'll leave my concluding comments for today's podcast, Brian, and let you do the wrap-up.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think we should do an episode on gratitude at some point and how it relates to nature connection and awareness, because I actually think that gratitude is a really complementary tool, and it's gratitude itself is a form of awareness that will help you both learn about nature faster and also just appreciate life on a deeper level. So I think that would be cool. That would be fun to talk about sometime.
Great.
But yeah, this has been really fun, Dave.
Thank you. Enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, I look forward to reconnecting again for our next episode.